Good evening, guys. Vulcan from Sunday Smoke Podcast here on a Friday afternoon. Today's subject, or today's thought experiment, is going to be about the word utopia, or maybe our searching for utopia. I don't think people understand what utopia really means. We're going to get into the topic of our searching for utopia. What does utopia mean? Utopia actually literally means no place. I don't think it's impossible because we lack resources to get to a utopia state. But, we have this little thing that has been plaguing us since the beginning of time. It's called human nature. Our desires, our passions. Everybody wants to be an individual. So I don't know if we can make a perfect state, we can always try to achieve or try to reach that thing. I just don't know if it's possible to make it a static, perfect state. There's plenty of different examples. I'll bring up some literary examples. I'll bring up, I don't know if I'll bring up any real world examples. I don't know if we're going to get into stuff like that. Very stoic guy. That's my thing right now. A lot of the stoic philosophy. I don't think our goal, we're not trying to build a perfect world. We're trying to build a better world. I don't know if we can achieve the perfect world where everybody believes a utopia is, which, like I said before, means no place. I've been working on topics these past weeks about building a perfect internal. I think the Stoics called it a inner citadel. I've got notes in front of me here. I'm actually using notes almost like a teleprompter. So, bear with me a little bit. I don't know if the quality of the production, if it's going to be better, because I'm looking at notes instead of looking at myself. There's a monitor right here with, this beautiful Vulcan face on it. So we'll see how this works out. Kind of introduce, call it the if-only syndrome. If you can look at comments, you can listen to conversations, you can see, some reels, some shorts, some posts. There's always this underlying concept or idea of, if this happens, we could do this, or if this happened, we'd all be happy. It's that whole thing I had brought up, I think, a couple of weeks ago in one of the short podcasts. I like to call them bonus podcasts. If, ands, or buts. If, ands, and buts were candies and nuts, we would all have a Merry Christmas, by the famous Dick Butkus. I think he played in Chicago. Get more into the stoic side of it. I feel very choppy right here. I don't know. I'm kind of struggling with this new setup. You'll have to let me know. I think the background looks better. I think the lighting's better. I'll just have to get better at using this technology, this convenience of having notes directly in front of me and not watching myself on the monitor. I'm actually noticing I'm wiggling back and forth. Habits. We've talked about habits before too. The if-only syndrome. Let's look at that. If you look at people's comments, their conversations, there's always this underlying idea. There's always this underlying theme. If only this happened, we could have achieved this. If I had done this, or this had happened for me, I could have done this better. If this, fill in the blank, happened, we could all be happy. That's outsourcing happiness to external, and it's something that you probably can't control. So you can't force outcome. We can't force an equality of outcome. If this had happened, everybody could do this. You can't fix every material problem. We can always try, achieve, and strive to fix all these material problems. Back into the Stoic philosophy, or Stoic hook, if you want to call it. I've got notes. I'm actually going to bring out the handy dandy journal. I was looking back at it this morning before I thought about using the podcast. I'm kind of using the podcast as part of my journaling. This way I get to talk. Instead of just writing in the journal, I'm actually talking. I'm making points. I'm trying to share my message. But this was back on July 26th of this year. And I was reading in the Enchiridion, Epictetus. So what I'm talking about, outsourcing our happiness to a system. It could be the government, it could be some kind of society, or maybe the system could be wealth. Whoever desires or avoids things out of their control cannot be free or faithful, but has to shift, fluctuate between them. What we're bringing up here is if you're actually becoming a slave, you're becoming a slave to your aversions or your desires. So that's why the if only this, like if this would happen, I could do this. It's like you have actually become a slave to that system. You know, it could be wealth, it could be your position in society, like I said, it could be you've got into this club, you know, you went to this school. But now you've actually become a slave to it, because if it changes, you have to change with it. It's like we can't force, some people will take this wrong, you can't force equality. You can force opportunity. I think like fairness, like everybody has the opportunity. You can remove barriers, but it's not forcing equality. When I say the word equality, that means everybody is not going to get the same thing. That's everybody's talking about, you know, wanting a utopia. I mean, you can plug in the words. I think people are talking about socialism. That's been in the sewer of the media, the social media. There's a lot of different things. We're all striving for that because it's something different. I'm not saying our system is perfect. I'm not saying our system has many flaws. But you can't have a demand of utopia. If you demand utopia, we say we make everything equal. It's like kind of chopping down all the trees. It's like because you want to make a pasture. Does that make sense? You know, we can't have the big large tree over here and have the small tree here because this one has more, this one's using more of this. It's that human nature. Maybe it's the human nature disease, is what we can call it. Maybe it's this way we've evolved. Maybe we've been conditioned. Maybe a better word, conditioned. Because merit has been the driving force, I guess, for capitalism. You know, if you produce a lot, you get paid a lot. And you have more, I don't say more opportunity, you have more material things. And I guess that brings in some envy and jealousy to people because they have this and I don't. And I think that's probably one of the underlying things. I've read this a long time ago. Kurt Vonnegut, great author. It's actually been brought up in some of my smaller conversations a couple of times in the recent past with a couple of different clients and here at the Vulcan layer. I can't remember the name of the story, but it's a story where everybody has to become equal. That no one is better than anyone else. So if you're the strong guy, you have to wear weights, you know, because if we don't want you to be able to go faster or do anything else than somebody else that is not as strong as you, if you're highly intelligent, very smart, whatever word you want to use, you actually put noisemakers in the ear so it equalizes everyone, so no one is better than anyone else. And, you know, that's the problem. You can't, I guess it's legislate. Is that a good word? Legislate competence. I talked about utility before. You know, you can't fix every problem because we're actually designed to have some friction, have some, I don't want to say despair, to have difficulties. That's kind of how we build. We get better. You know, I brought it up before. You know, I think everybody should experience a little anxiety, have a little stress. You know, it's like training. It's like physically training. We physically train your resolve. If we make everything comfortable, how about that? We don't want everything comfortable. Comfort or convenience, I don't want to say comfort, you know, make everything's, it'll be a comfort. Comfort and convenience are like hand in hand. If we make everything comfortable and everybody gets everything they want, you know, that's the dream of utopia. We're losing ability as the human. We need difficulty. We need difficulty to achieve things. We need difficulty to invent. We need difficulty to do this. We invent things because there's a struggle. If we take away all the struggle, we won't be able to develop any new things. I mean, it's like communications. Look at this. You know, communications. We can communicate with the telegraph. But now we communicate with instant messaging or FaceTime. We can actually be anywhere pretty much on the planet as long as we have our little device and somebody else. And everybody has a connection to the World Wide Web, internet. We can talk to each other. We can see each other. People love to complain. I've talked about complaints here recently. You know, if you think about if it was even possible, like the so-called government, society, powers that be. They say we unify, we equalize wealth, or everybody's definition of wealth anyway. Like we give everybody this mansion, this house, this place to live. Everybody has, I don't know, you can have a Ferrari, you can have a Tesla. You plug in whatever your desire is, or leave your aversion out. People would actually, because of our human nature, they would probably start fighting over, well, we all have this nice big mansion and this house and this beautiful car and this space that's ours, but you know what? Bob over there, he's got a better view than I do. That's not fair. That's not equal. I'm looking over this pasture, but he gets to look over the pond or the lake, or he gets the mountain view as I'm looking at a picture of the mountains. Because the human nature, we almost have an infinite, I would say an infinite desire, insatiable desire. Is that evolution? Is it conditioning? Makes me think of another Stoic principle. It's not the man who has too little, but the man that wants is the man that is poor. I'm sure I butchered that as usual. But like I said, I'm not trying to achieve perfection. It's the principles. It's that I'm trying to, it's like getting better, a little bit better and better and better. I don't need to be perfect. I don't need to be a utopia, right? Because you can't build a static. When I say static, it's a constant utopia. Because we're creatures that we're designed to change. We're designed to grow through struggle, through friction, through adversities. If we have an adversity, somebody comes up with a plan to get rid of that adversity. So that's part of the thing. This is the thought experiment. We can bring in Plato's thought experiment, the Republic. In some of your regulation time, your self-regulation time, I challenged you a couple weeks ago to do like 15 minutes. I think you should expand that more during the day. Just kind of like detach from all this social media, constant 24-hour information, and let's do a little deep reflection. Maybe using Plato's Republic as an example. I don't know if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. I'm actually rereading it now. The basic premise of just general of the text is a conversation between some guys, and they're talking about what's just and unjust and who's happy, the just or unjust man. But they get into the point where if you were going to build a republic, what would you put in it? What would you leave out? And trying to achieve utopia. And they talk about the different things, and then you get to realize how everything's intertwined, and if you have this, you have to have this, you have more of these people, you have this. But then they test it towards the end and see where the failures are. With our human nature and desires, like your utopia might be just total quiet, solitude. Your neighbor's utopia might be like a loud party, or everybody always coming over, or having dinner. There's not a perfect system, because what everybody believes is their utopia or good, or it's all subjective. It's all in their opinion. All right, guys, so we're going to come back. This is going to be the second take of the Utopia podcast or thought experiment. All right, we're going to move into more of a anti-fragile part of the quest for utopia. I talked about it before. We need to become a little anti-fragile. We need to have problems. We need to have a little struggle, because your resilience atrophies if you don't test it. Your utility atrophies if you don't test it. Just imagine, I brought it up earlier. If you build a society, say you build your republic, and all the problems are fixed, would that make us a strong human? Or it make us a more fragile generation of human? If you never had to figure out a problem, if you never had any conflict, does that make you a stronger person? I think it makes you more fragile, because you need to be able to have the confidence, resilience to fix any conflicts. Because there will be conflicts. You can bring in whatever system you think that's going to fix everybody's problem. There's still going to be conflicts because we're still humans. Because if there's no discomfort, we'll need distraction. We'll need, I mean, it's almost like it's built in now. I mean, it makes me think of Brave New World, Huxley, I believe. It's actually in real time thinking about it, the utopia of having 24-hour information. I won't say it's a utopia, but it's a lot like Brave New World. It's where they have I'm gonna butcher this too. Like I said, I'm not striving for perfection. It's the principles and the thought process of the principles is what we're striving for. That's building the internal. I believe it's called the inner citadel, the inner castle in Stoicism. Delayed gratification, like here recently, talking about the 2-day shipping. I think it shows a side effect if all the struggles, I won't say struggles, if inconveniences are smoothed out. That's what kind of everybody's looking for when they're looking at a utopia. It's like they're looking at the inconvenience side. They're not looking at what happens because of the inconvenience. It brings in Marcus Aurelius and another Stoic principle. The impediment is the way. Because you get to show yourself as a human, as being able to fix the thing, get around the inconvenience. I think some of the younger generations view or dream or hope, I guess I'll say it, socialism. It's a big buzzword right now. They're thinking socialism is going to fix all of their struggles right now. They want to make it a more equal world. That's why they look at it. Socialism is kind of a dream. There's aspects of it that seem really awesome. Like, if we could do this, everybody's going to have a house over their head. They're going to control the means of production. And I think they're missing the key point in that is that production still needs to happen. So this is the challenge I would like to give everybody. If you think socialism or consider socialism, the means of production, like people need to have the means of production, it's equality. You still have to produce things. So whatever your job is, whatever you do right now, I want you to really think about it. Would you do the exact same job with this exact same vigor for no money or less money? You're going to do the exact same thing because it needs to happen for the greater good. It will eliminate some jobs. There's no need for, say, the newest, biggest sound system in your car, the newest, biggest gaming system, because that's not part of socialism. That's not part of making everything equal. Everybody wants that. So any of your wants, you can almost forget about that because it's only going to be your needs. So think about it like a zoo. Think like a lion in the zoo. That's socialism. That's almost a utopia because they're fed, they're safe, they get all the medical treatment they want, they have their living quarters, but they're a prisoner. There's no needs, but now they're a prisoner. A prisoner may be in comfort. This like you don't have to hunt your food. You don't have to look for shelter. You don't have to worry about your medical issues. Is that utopia? Do you want to live in a zoo? I don't know. People are searching for that. I don't blame people for searching for that. Like this is a thought process going on now. Like I said, I'm using this as kind of my journal these days. I'm still writing in the journal, but being able to talk about the journal, talk about my ideas, and then I get to share them with you. This cool software. What kind of utopia should we be striving for? Something that's reachable. It's not a perfect economy. The economy's always going to be imperfect. You're not going to be able to meet the desires or the aversions of everybody. Government's always going to be imperfect. It doesn't matter. You can plug in whichever design of governing that you want to plug in there, talk about, dream of. It's always going to be imperfect. Because the biggest error in there is the human. Yes, there would be the human. You can't be perfect and be happy. I don't think. You can build a utopia of self-regulation. You can even say virtue, if you think about it. I mean, if you have no desires, if you have no aversions, you don't worry about things that are out of your control. I don't know, to me that's utopia. It's hard. I practice it every day, still practice it. I don't know if I'll ever not practice There's things you can't determine or control the weather. I mean, that's an easy one. You can't control opinions of others, even of you. You can influence. You can control how you present yourself. You can control how you communicate. But you can't control their opinion. You can't control their perceptions. And that's probably the hardest thing to let go of, is being the human, being the big brain, being the need to want to be included or affirmed or, I don't know, recognized. It's another thing about the utopia. There would be no recognition. There would be, I guess, there could be some positives. Like I said, this is free flowing thinking here. Think about the arts. An artist, a painter, a photographer. Back to the Republic thing, the Plato's Republic experiment. People do that. They make their hobby their business because they're providing a desire. They want to look at their pictures. They want to do this. If you had more of a socialist state, there would be no need for it. That person, their hobby, I'm not saying you couldn't have hobbies in socialism, but their hobby wouldn't be their job anymore. Because there would be no incentive for them to do it. There wouldn't be a need. I don't know. That's a hard thought. There would be a need. People like to have things, but that wouldn't be part of a need, or that's a want. It's not a need. It's not a need. You don't have to have a need for beautiful things. The goal of socialism is to make it equal for everybody, to provide all your needs. So it would hurt maybe some of the arts, because they wouldn't be, I don't know, how would you say, rewarded. It's like this world famous photographer. He goes out and can shoot pictures, beautiful destinations, and people trade currency for it. And then that allows him to do other things, buy new equipment. But that wouldn't be part of the socialism. If it is, who would decide who gets to do it? Opportunity is there now. Just because you want to do it doesn't mean you're going to be able to do it without friction, without difficulties, without sacrifice. I think the only utopia you can actually build maybe is, like I said, your self-regulation. You can always have your desires to keep getting better or getting more freedom of what you want to do. A utopia is the subject we started with. I don't think it's a destination. It's a desire. We can strive for a more utopia, as it's more commonly thought of, society. I think it's more of an imagination. I don't think just because we're humans that you could ever achieve a utopia. I think that's the biggest fault, or the biggest holdback, the biggest error, is there's individual, and you can't satisfy every individual. You can satisfy the masses, the average, the normal, whatever word you want to put in there, the majority. You can provide shelter, food, medicine, but then I think you'll lose a lot of other things. The biggest thing we can do is rule our internals. I think somebody told me this the other day. I wrote it down in my notes here. There's a lot of people wanting to build a utopia. We're trying to build a heaven here for people, but we haven't learned how to live on this planet yet. So I thought that was a pretty good quote. I don't remember. I can't give the credit to who told me that, but it's like we're trying to build a heaven for people who haven't yet learned how to live on Earth. I'll leave you with that thought. I think society is obsessed with more of a salvation. I'm trying to look for a systemic salvation. Trying to believe external structure, like our society or government structure or AI or technology or convenience, can cure our human condition. I want to bring up three different maybe authors, I would say. That's authors. Once you look at like Plato, you can use his example of the Republic, his discussion or thought experiment of building a just society. You can do Orwell, Brave New World, Huxley. Orwell's 1984. Some people think we're living it now. I think we're more like in the Brave New World, where we're all distracted by entertainment or convenience. Maybe we can use some of those examples or discuss these examples of why a salvation of our system could fail, or how it would fail. you can't build a perfect society, I don't think, with, we're using imperfect materials. It's like the human. We can't trade liberty for distraction. We can't enforce equality. We can't reach utopia unless you find it in your inner castle or inner citadel, as the Stoic philosophers from 2,000 years ago talk about. Everybody always is screaming for a reset. If we had this right system, we'd be happy. We'd crave a world without inequality, without suffering, without friction. I don't know, people have been trying this. I brought up Plato earlier, in the Republic. I think it was written 2,500 years ago, maybe closer to 3,000 years ago. It's 400, 500 BC, so 2,500 years ago. Have the thought experiment or the imagination of a perfect society that's, ruled by philosopher kings. I've got a lot of some of my clients that find that very amusing, since they are ex-philosophers or philosophy professors. There's guardians in the book. The engineer society from the top down. They're the protectors. It's, I don't know, I wouldn't call it socialism, but it's a type of government. You have a king, you have guardians, you have the citizen, but there's flaws to that. You can't get rid of. You can't. I would almost say breed. You can't breed out human passion and put in just perfect wisdom and perfect unity. We are still an imperfect being. You can control your own mind, but you can't control the government, the state. You can't, it's an external. If you let that become your happiness or your parent, you become like the child. I guess that's the better way. If you let the state become your parent, that makes you the child. And or I'll put /slave, because your desire and your avoidances, it's what you're bound to. So you have to be faithful to them, or you will be a slave. And bring up some Orwell, I guess. 1984, kind of what everybody thinks we're at now. Animal Farm. I think everybody should reread Animal Farm. The animals are looking for equality of outcome, or equity. Is that the right word? Equity. Rather than, not an equal or equality of chances or opportunities, a better word. Equality of opportunity. We can't legislate that everyone finishes a race at the same time. Everybody has different techniques, have different strengths, have different weaknesses. Referencing Animal Farm, the animals what overthrow the farmer. Well, they want to build a utopia of equality. What ends up happening? All animals are equal, but some are more equal than others, is my favorite line in that book. And at the end of the book, the pigs actually moved into the house. So you can't legislate or change the way humans drive for status, or, you can't change the status of reality for competence. You can't flatten, I guess there's a hierarchy. If you try to flatten it and make everybody equal, you can't. I don't think that can be removed. Even if you tried to get rid of social hierarchy, somebody still has to make decisions. Somebody, and that's where the human error comes in. Decides where they're going to build this, or who gets to build this, or decides they have to build this. I think it's a vice of political power. Some of the Stoic readings I have, Epictetus was actually a slave. He got out of his slave life. He was actually abused by his owner and destroyed one of his legs, and he could not use it. But he ended up becoming one of a great philosopher, a great teacher. One of the coolest things was eventually Marcus Aurelius actually came to see him. And I might be blending two stories together, and forgive me if I do, but the Emperor of Rome actually came to an older slave. Talking about true equality, because the emperor was coming to the slave for knowledge, to learn, to improve himself. Here's another good in my notes here about the cage of comfort. I know I've talked about conveniences. We'll call it the cage of comfort. I think because we're the need to always be amused. We're amusing ourselves. We're amusing ourselves to death. So that's kind of the theme of A Brave New World by Huxley. There's no war. Yeah, and Brave New World. There's no pain, there's no war, because is distracted. They're on this drug, obsessed with entertainment, like mindless entertainment. That sounds pretty shocking. People are obsessed with mindless entertainment. I'm using platforms that promote the mindless entertainment. Your phone could be the drug. It's delivering, or it's the mechanism delivering the rage bait, the 24-hour information, the 24-hour feel of connection, or wanting to feel connected. It makes us trade off so many different things. It's like we're trading off your desires or your meaning, your utilities. We're trading off utilities for distraction. We're all apt to do this. I find myself a victim. It's kind of funny. I thought about it earlier today. I could be doing some more productive things. I could be using my utility in a different way. But I really wanted to use the platform today to talk. But I'm using it actually as kind of my journal, kind of a talking journal, where I'm not writing stuff down. I'm not leaving or losing the journal, but I'm adding this to it. I'm adding to my utility. I'm adding to my ability to maybe speak my thoughts. I'm getting back to the reference to Huxley's Brave New World. What if we did find a utopia I had brought up earlier that fixed every problem we have? Are we looking for that so we can have a life of luxury? Are we looking for that so we can just go back to scrolling, going back to the sewer that's in our pocket? I can't think about it. What's the envision? What's everybody's desire? All the problems fixed for what? What would happen if all your problems went away? What would happen next? What would you do? Like, would you be motivated to design something, to paint something, to build something, or do you just want to live a life of luxury? Because I don't think that the human species is built for that. I don't think we've evolved that way. Because if you don't have struggle or difficulties, I don't think you have growth. Because you can't remove inconvenience, you'll lose the hero. How about that? Some Greek hero. If you remove the struggle, you'll remove the hero. You have to have the hero to defeat the struggle. How about the human glitch? Why do systems fail? Why do plans fail? Why do dreams or wants, maybe say, everybody wants a utopian type society where everything's fixed, there's no struggle. But why does that fail? Why would that system fail? I want to call it the human glitch, because that's the variable, human nature. We're designed to desire. We always want more. We always want to have more things. We want to have pleasures. We want to have no struggles. And all those are different, because one man's utopia could be another man's Hades. How about that? Or dystopia. Mine could be, my utopia would be, maybe I could be in nature all the time. Have no wants, no desires. I would have desires. Would have no wants. Everything would be handled. I wouldn't have to provide any needs, because all the needs are handled. That would be my utopia. Is that everybody's utopia? No. Some people would want to be in a social gathering. They want to be, for lack of a better term, they want to hang out at the pub. They want to hang out with the pub. They want to play pool, play darts. You build in the thing. Let's talk again about the anti-fragile. We need to become anti-fragile. That's what I said. Failure is actually good for you. Inconvenience is actually good for you. If we actually achieved a utopia where the state, the government, society solved every problem, would we create a species that's so fragile that just a single inconvenience would shatter them? I believe the human being, the human species, needs resistance. We're built that way. It's the way we train physically, and I think we're losing the ability to do that train mentally. We can't wait for, like in Plato's book, The Republic, we can't wait for a philosopher king to save us. There's no revolution that's going to make us equal. So we need to stop and think. We need to stop maybe all the entertainment. That's the biggest thing I see is, we're using entertainment for convenience. Guys, I just want to go over a little bit what we have been talking about in the previous clips that I've pieced together for you for this week's Sunday Smoke podcast. I've talked about some models of maybe Plato's Republic, Animal Farm, Brave New World, asking the questions, if we can come up with the conclusions, if utopia was the subject, can we build a perfect society out of, I would say, imperfect supplies or imperfect bricks, that being human nature, different individual wants, not necessarily needs. We can seek out all these external systems for salvation. You can plug in the buzzwords, the socialism. You can use technology, society's hierarchy. Search for a philosopher king or listen to a philosopher king. It's all a desire for, I guess, safety or search for equality, or I don't know. It comes into more it becomes like we want to find a controlled zoo. We want all the needs provided. Well, that's just one version of utopia. I don't want to say it's everybody's version of utopia. We just have to remember, if you go back to the example I gave of the zoo, zoo's a prison that removes all the different struggles. There's no hunts, there's no medical issues. But, I think we're built as humans, our species, that we need struggle. Because without the struggle, there's no growth. There's no new technologies. That's how we come up with new things. If we don't have a struggle, bring it back to the illusion of there could be no hero. Bring it back to some of my Greek readings. But if we did find this truly external utopia, where would we be? Would we be just, I don't know, I wouldn't say bored. Would we be weaker? Would we be happier? Would we be unhappy? Would we be just distracted by an endless stream of entertainment? So I wanted to maybe stop searching for an external good place, utopia, fix for what's going on now, and start with building our inner citadel, our inner castle. It's not, keep grabbing my chest right here, but it's just through this. It's through your mind. It's through, self-regulation. It's through delayed gratification. We can start with my challenge from last week or the week before, whenever you're listening to this wonderful Internet Gold podcast. Let's refuse to complain. I think the challenge for this Sunday on Sunday Smoke is let's build your own republic within your inner citadel, within your mind. And that way you can truly find the place of utopia. So just remember, this is Sunday Smoke. I'm Vulcan. See you next week or sometime in between.